The bill includes funding for various studies, including one for evacuation. When can we expect the results from those studies?
Well, we have a timeline for the FAA. They're going to need to begin the studies right away, but we have to also give them an opportunity to conduct a full testing. And so, I would expect that they would begin the testing over the next 6 months to 2 years.
And then after the testing, when you get the results, how soon after that is implementation or a change in practices? What does that look like?
Well, I think we're going to get some preliminary results, and I think that is going to inform, the next key bill will be the next FAA reauthorization, when we will once again look at how to make what we need to put into the next FAA bill, and that will be probably the next big change to how the FAA operates and the requirements for passenger aircraft. But that doesn't stop Congress in between, say next of the next Congress that would begin next year, from if we need to do something very quickly, pass some legislation more quickly then as well. And there's a lot of other studies that language in this bill. For example, I have one of my priorities was to require the FAA to look at onboard emergency kits and make sure that they are reviewing what is required medical equipment on onboard emergency kits more frequently. I've heard from folks and say, it's great that we have defibrillators on all the aircraft right now, but what we really need is insulin and epinephrine auto injectors, because people are more likely to have an allergic reaction than they are to have a heart attack on an aircraft. So these are some of the things that are in this bill. That's going to take a study, but we'll be able to act on more quickly once we get the results.
Improving accessibility was also a key priority for you. Can you talk about how this legislation does that?
Yes. So I have several pieces of my priorities on accessibility and disability access that are in this bill. My Mobile Act is part of this now. It would require air carriers to publish information on the size of the aircraft cargo hold, because if I have an electric chair, for example, and I want to get on an airplane, right now I don't know how big the cargo hold is. There's no requirement. So I could actually book a flight on an aircraft, and when I get there, they put me on the plane, and then my wheelchair doesn't make it on the plane, and they put the wheelchair on a different flight. So then I land at my destination, and my wheelchair, which are essentially my legs, is not going to be there for another 6 hours, for example, because the cargo hold wasn't big enough. This would require the airlines to publish the dimensions, so that when I go to buy my ticket, I can see, oh, you know what, I'm not going to book a flight on that particular flight because they're using that aircraft, and I know that my wheelchair won't fit. So it's very much empowering the consumers. It also would require the airlines to issue passenger refunds if their wheelchair can't fit in the cargo hold because they've switched the aircraft. So if I say I bought a ticket on a 737, but they switch me to an Airbus, and now my wheelchair won't fit, they have to issue me a refund. So there's one of those. I have legislation called the ADAPT Act, which is access and dignity for all people who travel, which basically would require the Secretary of Transportation to issue regulations about seating accommodations for persons with disabilities, and so that they can also have a good list of what are known service animal that can be on the flights with people, and get pre-registered so that you can have a more streamlined process to get on board. I also have legislation in there where it requires the airlines to stow my wheelchair inside the cabin of the aircraft if possible. A lot of times the aircraft has the capability of carrying my wheelchair on board, but they just don't do it. And I would rather keep my wheelchair on board so that I can, need it in case of an emergency, or just to keep it safe from being banged around in the cargo hold. So there's really quite a lot. And then, of course, I also have legislation in here for and to establish a new airport accessibility grant program. It's funded at $20 million a year from the airport improvement funds, the AIP funds, in order to help airports make their facilities more accessible. So I'm really pleased with all of the wins we had in this when it comes to disability access for air traffic, people who travel by air.